Oh, let's do another one of these. Hi, everyone. Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. I hope you're doing well, and it's time for another edition of our overrated and underrated series where I go on rateyourmusic.com. I look at some of the albums within a given decade on their albums charts. I pick out a record that I think particularly is overrated as far as score and placement on those charts. And then I pick a record from the same decade that I think is kind of underrated and not getting the love and the focus that it deserves. Pretty straightforward description, right? You get it, I get it, we all get it, let's do it. Quick shout out to our sponsor first though, good people still over at The Ridge, making these amazing, sleek, minimalist, sexy, fit in your front pocket wallets that, are a great replacement for your disgusting old bulky leather wallet. Hit up that link down below, promo code MELON, 10% off the order, all you gotta know. But yeah, the last video we did in this series, we focused on the 2010s, and I thought it would make sense in the next episode to rewind on the 2000s, because there's actually a couple examples in this decade that I could pick from, but I chose one overrated record, one underrated record, and I figured it made sense to, again, rewind a decade back, because a lot of my opinions and feelings on records from the 2010s pretty well established at this point. Kicking things off with the overrated record, I have spoken on this album before, specifically in my Radiohead Worst to Best video, and that is going to be Amnesiac. Yes, again, the 2001 album from Tom York and the Radioheads. And look, just to be clear for anybody who's unfamiliar with my content, I'm not a Radiohead hater, I'm not anti-Radiohead. Radiohead's Kid A, as well as In Rainbow's, place very high on the Rate Your Music 2000s albums chart, and I think both of those records are fantastic, especially In Rainbows, and are well deserving of their placements in that chart. Would not debate those placements at all in any way whatsoever. However, in regards to Amnesiac, it's kind of a different story, because this record canonically has been described many times over as a project of, leftovers and one-offs from that Kid A era that, were not finished enough, or maybe just wouldn't have fit into the record. And yeah, that's kind of what it is, and that's what it sounds like when you actually get into the nitty-gritty of the LP. Now, granted, I think a few of the band's best songs from this time period are on this record, Pyramid Song, as well as Knives Out. Both great tracks, fantastic performances, beautiful, wonderful, eerie, powerful instrumentation. And I will say, overall on this record, regardless of how well developed any particular song is, the chord progressions are fantastic, and Tom York's vocal performances are passionate and stunning and haunting. But I feel like that's where the bulk of this record's appeal starts and ends. Beyond this point, when you start getting into things like song structure, many of the tracks on this thing kind of stale out or feel super repetitive, might hit powerful crescendo points like on You and Whose Army, for example, but then past that passage don't really know where to go or how to finish things off properly. And then once you're going toward the end of the record, things really do start to feel like, yeah, we're really just getting some slightly unfinished, underdeveloped moments here, and stuff like the closer, the very jazzy closer, that wouldn't have made any sense whatsoever on Kid A. Now, again, it's not a terrible album by any means, nor is it anywhere close to Radiohead's worst record, but is it a top 100 groundbreaking, genre-defining record of the 2000s? I don't think so. I think a lot of what Radiohead had to do, or did, in this kind of experimental, out there, electronically fused art rock field, they did on Kid A. And not to say that, we should just erase Amnesiac from the planet or anything like that, but does it hold a candle to Kid A? I don't think so. And once more, to bolster this record, it doesn't have any overt duds on it in the way the Hail to the Thief tracklist does, but it just doesn't hold a candle as far as development and groundbreaking ideas that OK Computer or Kid A brought to the table. And do I see this album as better or superior to some of the records it immediately charts on top of on Rate Your Music for the 2000s, like Boris's Pink, or Mars Volta, Francis the Mute, Clips's Hell Hath No Fury, Drux from Aphex Twin, also Yoshimi Battles the Robots from Flaming Lips, all much bolder records and incredibly influential for their respective genres, which, if Amnesiac is that, it's only because of the power and influence of the couple of records that came before it, not because of what this album specifically does. On this chart, I think it's just a little tad bit overrated. Now, on the flip side of this video, I want to talk about an album that I think, frankly, is kind of underrated for the 2000s. It is the second LP, simply titled LP, from the Toronto, Canada band known as Holy Fuck, which is a group that, had a moment in the mid to late aughts and, came out with this record that I think is their best and had a lot of buzz behind it in the indie scene and the blogosphere. It was very hot for a moment. But the band sort of failed to, I think, come out with an album that was better than this, and also failed to, I think, drum up as much attention for themselves as a group as they did on this record. So with that, over time, I think this album has been kind of forgotten and also underappreciated a bit upon its release. Because if you're talking about fusions of rock and electronic music for the 2000s, I think this record is truly one of the best. And once again, I get how it's easy to sort of discount this thing. Front cover looks a little unserious, and it's just like a random indie act nobody cares about that has like a silly, offensive, bad word name, like ugh. Which, yes, there were many of back during this time, and a lot of them, weren't worth a lick of shit. But I personally think that this Holy Fuck album is, and it's currently sitting on Rate Your Music with just like a 3.39, like it's just some mid shit, when in fact this record is loaded with some of the most blood pumping, exciting, and thrilling interband performance chemistry of any record in this genre for this time period. In fact, I haven't heard a whole lot of albums that I think, best this record as far as like a combination of indietronics and krautrock and a little bit of synth punk too. The synthesizers, the bass, the synth sequences, and the sequence drums, as well as like the weird little psychedelic touches of vocals here and there, all of which, from what I understand, are just like, not communicating any kind of lyrics or message or anything like that. It's usually just like some odd mouth sounds. Sounds like some pretty simple elements coming together, but they create a psychotic whirlwind of sound on nearly every track here because the band is just so damn good at working together as a cohesive, well-oiled unit. Whether they are just speeding through the live cut of Super Inuit that kicks the entire project off, giving us really crazy 80s throwback electro vibes on Milkshake, which might actually be my favorite track on the entire record, or working their way very subtly through a grand build of hopeful and inspirational synths, as they do on the track Lovely Allen, which at the time was kind of like the big buzzy single from the record that was kind of taking the band places. Every single track on this thing, be it a little beat loop or synth melody or something, there is an element of all of these tracks that are just an incredibly sharp earworm, which is certainly a feat because, yeah, it's just like instrumental music. There's no vocal hook or set of lyrics on any of these tracks to like really kind of sell you on any of them. Yet bits like on Lovely Allen, like that just sears itself into my brain every time I listen to it. Deeper into the project, I love the tense and speedy sequences of The Pulse, one of the most electronic cuts on the entire thing. The blurty synths and odd, jerky grooves and rhythms of Royal Gregory are awesome as well. Then you've got the more exotic rhythms on Echo Sam, and with Safari and Choppers, as well as like the Bone Us bonus track and studio version of Super Inuit. If you listen to the kind of expanded edition of this thing, the record finishes out as strong as it starts. But yeah, I think this record for its time combined all of these influences and elements in a pretty sharp and unique catchy way. There are great performances, fuzzy, raw, and exciting production across the entire record too. And there's not a single moment on it that lulls. It finishes out at a very tight 37 minutes, sans the bonus tracks. So this record's a bit of a non-stop, exciting, groovy, electronic rock thrill ride that I think over the years just hasn't gotten enough attention or praise, especially on a chart such as this, honestly. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions. I'm going to leave it there. What do you guys think about all this in the comments? Is Amnesiac overrated? Is this record underrated? Am I insane? Should I be put in a mental institution? Let me know. I'm sure you will. Over here next to my head is another video you can check out. Hit that up with a link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, overrated and underrated forever.